Who are the real Jews?
Who are the people? Who are the modern? Yes. Who are the descendants? So we know, and I believe, and I agree with you as a Christian, that God promised this land from modern-day Iraq to modern-day Egypt to this people, the Jews, to Abram's, actually not to Abram's descendants, as it says in Genesis 15. Who are his descendants now, and how do we know who they are?
But then if I'm going to go forth and say, well, you know, those that say that they are Jews but are in fact not, but are the synagogue of Satan, and the Ashkenazi are in fact not Jews, they are sons of Gomer, Japheth, they're not even Shemites. Many people have come to me and said, well, who are the real Jews then? Where are the Jews and what's going on?
So I think it's fair to ask, who are they and how do we know? So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe. So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know?
As I've said, 92% of the people that say that they are Jews today are in fact Ashkenazi.
Netanyahu's parents did not speak Hebrew. Okay, they didn't live in this region. Netanyahu, the founders of this country, were mostly secular. Some of them were avowed atheists. They were not praying for the peace of Jerusalem. They weren't praying at all because they didn't believe in God. There's no genealogy linking their families to the people of this land 3,000 years ago. They're not.
Because what's happened is the Ashkenazi are in fact occupying the tents of Shem, the real Shemites. Shem's not there. It's the Zionist occupiers that are there.
So how do we know, since they didn't share a language, they didn't share a religion, they had no religion whatsoever, how do we know that they had a right to come here from Eastern Europe?
If I'm right, it's 1982, and he didn't go by Benjamin Netanyahu back then. He went by whatever his more, European-sounded name was. He was Netanyahu by the 90s.
Why did he change his name?
Well, they all kind of, because the whole thing, Joe, is that they're all, Israel was a European, construct. They were made by a bunch of Europeans who came over and created Israel. But then they have to claim that they're the true Semitic people.
Is it true that genetic testing is outlawed there?
I believe that is true. I believe that's true. I double check on that, but I believe it's true.
We should definitely
need permission from the government to go get DNA tests and stuff.
Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct? Yes. Okay. Why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean, maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that.
This is the problem with the term Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
Because if these are European Jewish people, this is not the exact same genetics.
That's right. And
genetic testing
heavily regulated.
Here, you can fucking get it at Walgreens.
That's right.
Yeah. If you wanted if a human being has bodily autonomy and you want to find out where your ancestors came from, why wouldn't that be?
Would we do that all over the world?
This is the only country in the world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
What about people who convert to Judaism? Would they have a right?
Well, you've just said,
I mean, there are converts to Judaism, so
you just told
they
me,
can make Aliyah. They may not have
you've just
DNA.
told me that it doesn't matter. You told me moments ago, trying to keep track, that it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God or whether or not you practice Torah Judaism or Rabbinic Judaism, which is something else that I don't even know I don't even know what that means. But it doesn't matter whether you're, quote, a religious Jew or not. What matters is that you are part of the Jewish people to whom God gave this land that extends from the Nile to the Euphrates. And so, if you believe that, wouldn't you want to know with a burning passion who those people are? And because of science, we can now know who those people are. So why aren't we finding out?
What do you think? You know,
Well, look, like the only real answer to this is that the Israel project, or the Zionist project, always relied on this kind of claim, which is a crazy claim in a way. It's like a supernatural property right claim,
right?
That, you know, like that you have this, which, you know, if you go, there was that great documentary on the settlers in the West Bank, and they'll all tell you, to a man or to a woman, they focus a lot on that godmother of the settlers woman, but they'll all explain to you, like in very plain English with a Hebrew accent, that God promised them all this land. And so, like, God promised us all this land. So, like, I don't know who these other people are here, but God didn't promise it to them. He promised it to us. And so, well, let's just say, hypothetically, if, say, the truth is that the Jews of 2,000 years ago weren't actually kicked out of the land, but in fact, they were forced to convert, and that actually those people who you're saying were never promised the land are actually the people who were promised the land and then converted to Islam, and in fact you're just some European who came in here way after that. That, I'm just saying, hypothetically, if that was the case, that would be something that maybe you would want to control the information on.
Who are the true Jews? Well, the Fehalim, which is a term for the so-called Palestinians, the migrant farmers that never left the land of Israel in 70 of the Common Era when the Romans came in. They still were attached to the land. They were called the Fehalim, or what we call today the so-called Palestinians, are in fact the descendants of the poor agricultural Jewish society that stayed in the land, yet they converted to Islam in the 6th and 7th centuries to avoid paying the Islamic jizya tax, because if they had done that, they would have lost their land, and they were attached to the land, so therefore they converted to Islam so that they could stay in the land, working the soil that their forefathers worked. This is recognized in 1918 by the historians David Ben-Gurion, who of course was the future Prime Minister of Israel back then, and Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, the future President of Israel. Both of them historians recognize this fact. Today, of course, it's buried in your history books. But what about the affluent, regal Jews that weren't connected to the land? Because we've addressed who the poor migrant workers are, the Fehalim. But not everyone in the tribe of Judah was connected to the land. There was a royal, regal class that were merchants that would travel throughout the empire and throughout Judea and throughout the Roman Empire as merchants. These were the regal, affluent Jews that weren't connected to the land, but they were engaged in trade and export. Who are they? And where did these royal, nomadic Jews migrate to?
I don't understand, and you're very discouraged in the United States from asking this question for some reason. It's a foundational question. But I just want to get to the point that forms the basis of this whole conversation, which is who has a right to the land?
Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And Yahweh shall bring you into Mitzrayim, Egypt again, with ships. And the way of which I said to you, you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold to your enemies for slaves and female slaves, and no man shall buy you. And that is what happened to the regal class of the house of Judah. The history of slavery? Why? Ask the bloody question. Why are they only teaching you the history of slavery as far back as the 16th and the 17th century? Why are they only going that far back? Because they don't want you to go farther back than that, because then you'll actually find out the truth. And you've got to understand and question, why do they do this throughout the whole of America, in all the public schools? Why do they only go back as far as the 16th and the 17th century to talk about slavery? Because Islam designed infernal slavery. And then the Ashkenazi Khazars, those who say they are Jews and are not, are the ones that marketed it. And the regal Negro nomads, exiled from the kingdom of Judah, were the main recipients of it at the hands of the indigenous black Africans. Because you've got to understand, the regal class of the house of Judah came down from Israel, and they came into the land of the black Africans. And the black Africans resented the regal class of the house of Judah in their land, because they had laws, they had customs, they had civility. And they were a regal class of Negro that came down into Africa. And later on, it was the Ashkenazi, the Islamic slave traders as well, that then worked together with the indigenous black Africans to enslave the regal house of Judah. This is what we've got to understand, but you've got to go back before the 16th century to understand the roots of it. And there were white Ashkenazi Khazar ship owners. There were the buyers and the sellers. And they're not going to fill you in on all of this, but really you've got a four-tier system. Number one, you have the Negro nomads that were exiled from the kingdom of Judah. Number two, you had indigenous black African hunters that resented the regal Negro nomads that had come into their territory with their own customs, with their own laws that were different and would not assimilate into their tribal culture. They were their own tribe. They were the regal house of Judah. Number three, you had Islamic trappers that worked with the indigenous black Africans to trap the regal Negro house of Judah. And then you had them sell them to the Ashkenazi ship merchants, along with many Portuguese and British Ashkenazi. It's just like Al-Qaeda today, or is it ISIS, or is it ISIL, or is it IS? I mean, right? Let's just change the name as much as possible to throw you all off so you really don't know what's going on. Let's keep switching the identity to hide the people. Why don't we just keep renaming you? Are you Negro? Oh, no, you're not Negro. No, you're colored. No, you're not colored. You're African American.
God the news that his descendants will inherit the land, and you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. And that would include like basically the entire Middle East.
Christian Zionism. I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
Tucker Carlson think God's people have to prove it. He even suggested the chosen one have to do DNA test. Are we really going to do the DNA test the whole world? Just to prove the true descendants of Abraham? Anyway, simple question. Who are the true descendants of Abraham?
Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct?
Yes.
Okay. why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean, maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that. If you believe the theology that you've just explained to me,
Would we do that all over the world?
well,
And everybody
this
would-
is the
would
only
would
country in
Brits-
the world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
But there are people who may not have bloodlines, but who have converted to Judaism. Are they going to be able to live here? Are you going to kick them out?
By your standards, they can't live here.
No, no,
because
you
you just
never
told
said-
me
no,
that they have a right to live here because God gave them the land because they're the descendants of Abram.
They're the descendants of Abraham. But if they're the spiritual descendants of Abraham and they've now decided that they're converting to Judaism, then do they have a right to live in Israel?
Since you began this conversation by asking me, did I think they had a right to come here?
Yeah, that's
And
what
my
God
question
is.
was, on what basis do they have the right?
Yeah.
And
And I
you
tried
said
to-
because God granted it to
Yeah, and I also said because that there should be a land where Jews could live in peace and safety.
And I asked you what a Jew was, and you couldn't answer it. You
No, I
said
didn't.
it partly is religious, but it doesn't have to be. It's partly genetic, but it doesn't have to be. And so that you can see why I'm.
I think I was very clear.
Bibi's family, we know they lived in Eastern Europe. There's no evidence they ever lived here. He's not religious.
But
in what sense?
ancestrally- but
how do we know
ancestrally-
that? Do we-
Are you one of those people who recite the Lord's Prayer without realizing its true power? Maybe you've said it 100 times, maybe 1,000. Maybe you grew up hearing it in church, repeating it before bed, or reciting it before meals. But have you ever stopped to ask, why this prayer? Why did Jesus give us these exact words? Was it just a simple prayer for daily use? Or was it something much deeper? What if I told you that within these few sentences, Jesus revealed a battle plan, a divine connection, and the ultimate key to unlocking God's power in your life? What if I told you that this prayer is a weapon, a declaration, a direct alignment with heaven itself? The Lord's Prayer is not just a ritual, it's a strategy. It's not just a recitation, it's a revelation. Jesus didn't just say, "Here's a prayer you can say before meals." No, he said, "This is how you should pray. This is spiritual warfare. This is the blueprint for how to approach God." And once you understand the depth of this prayer, you will never pray the same way again. In this video, we are going to explain the Lord's Prayer like never before. You're going to see why Jesus taught this prayer and what most people completely overlook. The hidden power behind each phrase and how understanding this prayer can transform your relationship with God. By the time you finish this video, you will never just recite this prayer again. You will pray it with power. If you are one of those who doesn't seem to understand the depth of this prayer, worry not. We are about to break it down for you in a way that will make you see every word, every phrase, and every meaning with fresh eyes. From this day on, your prayers will never be the same. And at the end, we will pray together, using the Lord's Prayer the way Jesus intended, fully understanding its meaning, fully activating its power. What you're about to hear could change the way you approach God forever. And if you know someone who prays without feeling connected to God, send them this video. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video. It helps share God's message with more people. Comment below what part of the Lord's Prayer speaks to you the most. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know how this message could change their prayer life. We have created in-depth explanation videos on every book of the Bible to help you go deeper in your faith and walk with God. Each Deep Bible Stories video is designed to break down Scripture in a way that is simple, clear, and deeply impactful. It is our hope and prayer that this video and every message we share will awaken something in your spirit, a faith so strong that nothing can shake it. We've also turned some of our most powerful teachings into ebooks so you can study at your own pace and take your understanding even deeper. Check the description to grab yours. With that being said, let's get started. If there's one word in the Lord's Prayer that changes everything, it's the very first one, Father. After breaking down what this prayer really is, a battle plan, a strategy, a connection to divine power, the most important lesson we can take from it is who we are praying to. Jesus could have said our Lord or our King. He could have started with, O Almighty Creator of the universe. But instead, he deliberately chose to say, our Father. That wasn't by accident. That was intentional. Many people struggle to relate to God because they see him as distant, untouchable, and impossible to please. Maybe that's how you feel sometimes. You believe in him, but do you truly know him? When you pray, does it feel like you're trying to get the attention of an all-powerful ruler who might be too busy to listen? Or do you speak to him as a child speaks to their loving father? Think about it. If you are a parent, how do you feel when your child comes running to you, not because they need something, but because they just want to be near you? They crawl into your lap, they hug you, they just want to be with you. Do you turn them away? Do you say, I'm too busy? Or does your heart swell because that's exactly what you want, for your child to be close to you? That's what God desires. That's why Jesus said, our Father. For many people, this word, Father, is a difficult one. Maybe your earthly father was absent, abusive, or impossible to please. Maybe he wasn't there at all. And when you hear the word Father, it doesn't bring comfort. It brings pain. But here's the truth. God is not like that. He is not an imperfect, flawed human. He is the perfect Father. He is not like your earthly father. He is everything your earthly father should have been. The enemy wants you to believe that God is distant, cold, and uninterested. That's the greatest deception. If Satan can convince you that God is hard to reach, then he can keep you from experiencing the power of this prayer. But Jesus shattered that lie with two simple words, our Father. And then he adds something even deeper, in heaven. When we say our Father in heaven, we are declaring two things at once. We are his children. This is a relationship, not just a religious practice. Heaven is our home. We are not just talking to some distant cosmic force. We are connected to the King of heaven. And that is where we belong. This is what makes prayer different from just wishing, manifesting, or hoping for good things. When you pray, you are speaking to someone who loves you, knows you, and already has a plan for you. And this is exactly why Jesus told us to start our prayers this way. He was inviting us into a different way of thinking. When you come before God, don't come as a beggar. Come as a son. Come as a daughter. Because when you approach God as your Father, it changes how you pray. Look at Jesus. He called God Father more than 150 times in the Gospels. He didn't just teach us to say it, he lived it. In John 11:41-42, before raising Lazarus from the dead, Jesus began his prayer by saying, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. That's confidence. That's the relationship he wants you to have. And when you understand this, your prayers will never be the same. You won't pray as someone who hopes God is listening. You will pray as someone who knows he is.
Genesis 32. And Jacob went on his way. The angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him." And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds, and the camels, into 2 bands, and said, "If Esau come to the one company and smite it, and the other company which is left shall escape." And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidest unto me, Return unto thy country, and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies, and of all the truth which thou hast shown unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their coats, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, "Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove." And he commanded the foremost, saying, "When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? And thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us." And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, "On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau, when ye find him. And say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me." So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And he said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." And he said unto him, "What is thy name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, thy name." And he said, "Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob